we try to focus on the best practices and also the most interesting innovations in recruitment advertising and recruitment marketing. My name is Peter Weddle, and my guest today is one of the smartest people in this field, Alexander Chukovski. Alexander, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Peter. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks to everyone who joined for the next 30 minutes.
Great. So let's begin at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, sure. So I run two job boards in Web3 and crypto. I've been doing this for the past 5 years. I also work as a consultant in the HR tech space. So helping companies with topics like job classification with AI and machine learning, job scraping, SEO, Google Jobs optimization, programmatic job advertising, anything that you can think about our industry. And before that, I held various managerial roles in HR tech. So I worked at JobSync as a CTO. I was the director of data science at Expertier, a small German niche job board, and so on.
So with all that background in technology, I want to know how come you still have a full head of hair and I don't? I mean, I don't understand that. Okay, so you're the author of a forthcoming book, a TAtech book, I should say, on ChatGPT, Undressed and Unadorned, the truth about ChatGPT in talent acquisition. Why did you write that book and why now?
Yeah, first of all, let's say that this is the first book that I've ever written. So don't be too harsh when you read it for the first time. Second of all, it's not written with ChatGPT. It's actually old school human written book. You know, I wrote every line on it. And I guess at some point I just got really tired of reading all the AI influencers on LinkedIn and Twitter. They're making all these crazy promises about this technology and what you can do with it and how you can earn $10,000 per month just doing basically nothing. And I think that people get a very wrong impression of what it is possible and what's not. And I decided to write about it. At the same time, there are some truly great use cases for generative AI that got very little publicity so far. And this was also kind of a driver on writing this book. I just think that we focused on the wrong thing in the public space rather than what's actually truly valuable. And I've been working in AI for probably about 8 years now. So I think I have some things to say and I just wanted to do it. We saw a very huge hype wave in 2017 and 18, where a lot of HR tech companies jumped on the AI hype train. Very little came out of it. I saw a lot of money being burned. So I guess I'm also trying to help people not do the same mistakes that were done in the past.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems our industry is always chasing the next shiny new thing. That's not to say that these technologies, when they come out, can't ultimately be helpful. But in the beginning, it seems as if, as you say, there's a lot of hype about what they can do and very little discussion about their limitations and challenges. And the best way to put them to work effectively is to know the whole picture. And that's, I think, the value of the book that you've written. A little shameless promotion. We're going to release Alexander's book at our upcoming conference called TAtech Europe and the EMA Job Board Forum. It's going to be held in London on December 4 through 6. All of the attendees will get a copy of the book and have a chance to have Alexander sign it. He's going to be there not only to talk about his book, but he's speaking at the conference about Google for Jobs. So a lot of insights coming up. Okay, so let's begin at page 1. What exactly is ChatGPT and why is it considered such a significant advance over previous versions of AI?
Well, I guess a lot has been written on this. So I will just give my perspective. ChatGPT is really great at writing text, it does it very well. And it does it because of two components. First, it's able to capture the meaning of the words that you're inputting. It doesn't really understand them, but it manages to capture the meaning because the architecture that GPT, this is the underlying model that ChatGPT uses something called the transformer architecture. And this is something that has been already published a couple of years ago, around 5 years ago, by Google. Funny fact that one of the main technology points of ChatGPT is based on a Google research that gets very little publicity. But anyway, so this architecture, right, the transformer architecture, it predicts the next word, right, which is fairly simple, but it's able to take a lot of context from the whole input that you have given it, right? So it's able to render a very good prediction of what the next word is, and then the next word, and then the next word, right? And this input gets fed into the model again and again and again. That's why it's called an autoregressive model. And it can consider very long inputs. And of course, the statistics behind it has been based on pretty much the whole internet. So it had a lot of training data. And that's kind of the first component, right? It predicts words, writes a new text, but there is a little bit of randomness because the way the next word is picked, it's purely random. You can of course control this, but it's very random. So what OpenAI did is there is a second layer that runs on top of the GPT model that has been trained on a lot of data. We now know more about how this was done. That's the reinforcement learning from human feedback. And essentially, OpenAI did a lot of predictions on inputs, and of course, they're standardized, right? So software development, writing blog posts, and so on and so on. Just think about these different categories. And they have hired tons of people to do the initial training. They were very well qualified. I think they have about 1,000 software developers in Brazil, for example, when it comes to the software engineering side of it. We don't know what has been used in order to fine-tune the rest of the cases, but you can assume that they have vast resources to do that. And they also have our training data now, because when we interact with ChatGPT, we also give it feedback about what is good and what is bad. So when you take these two combinations together, this is, I guess, where the magic happens. So that's kind of the first thing that I see as very important and innovative. And the second one is about the fact that there's just an API. So you can start building today with very little technological knowledge. You don't have to be a developer to work with the OpenAI API. So what they did for AI adoption is really remarkable, and no other company on earth has done this with this kind of ease. Of course, when it comes to value, of course, there are other companies that did tremendous research. But I guess when it comes to adoption and like being able to get value that's relevant for your business out of this technology, that's a first. So that's how I see it.
I think it's important to underscore the care with which OpenAI added the human moderation, if you will, to the gross data. There was a recent article in a magazine published here in the States, which took a look at not OpenAI per se, but a whole host of AI development companies. And many of them, as you just said, are very careful about training the data with the right experts so that you teach the model the right interpretations of the data. But there are, unfortunately, other companies that hire trainers whose only capability is the ability to speak English. They have virtually no expertise in the area to which the models will be applied. So in terms of, thinking about buying talent technology with AI embedded in it, it's important to check how the data were put together to teach the to teach the machine in the first place, and or the model, I should say, in the first place, and then how it's to the other point you just made, and then how it's trained over time, so that really it's learning with the right data and it's learning the right information about that data, or the right
Yeah.
perspective. So, okay, well, that's very helpful. Now, one of the things that you talk about that I found fascinating in the book was 4 waves of AI development, and you actually relate it to your own career. So, talk a little bit about those 4 waves.
Yeah. So again, like disclaimer, this is just based on my experience. So that's not a academic or a widespread view of AI. It's just based on my career so far. Back when I started in 2014 was the first use case that I ever worked with AI. What we used back then was Java and Scala, and it was a lot of custom tech, right? So it was very complicated to build a use case on top of it. And there was no open source technology, or very little. There was very little about how to build the infrastructure that it is required to query the model, right? So we had to write our own API, we had to write our own servers, our own web servers, because none of the existing solutions were good enough for this model. And we needed a lot of training data, and alone the effort that we had to invest to get the training data in a stage where it could be used for the training took months. So this was kind of wave 1, right? So now open source, really early. Think about assembly programming in 1980s, for example. Then wave 2 was a little bit later, and this was like the first big change. So I'm talking probably around 2016, 2018, where you had a lot of open source technology coming out. So Hugging Face, which is right now, I guess, one of the leading AI companies when it comes to publishing models and open source software. They came out. There was Fast AI, which is something similar to Hugging Face, but again, it's like frameworks that help you train models and implement them faster. The open source community got really big. The whole Python world exploded. We got a lot of infrastructure abstraction that allowed us to, build the models faster and deploy them at scale. So I guess 2016 and 18 is where we saw this like real explosion of usage, and that was a good, very good place for AI, but it was still lacking certain steps around automation, right? So you needed to be a software engineer to be able to work with AI. You needed to understand data engineering. You needed to be able to write code. And what changed, I guess, around the end of 2018 and in the next 2 years was the concept of AutoML. At least for me, of course, this is again based on my experience only. So the magic about AutoML is that in essence, you get a data set, you give it to a computer, and then a computer decides how to pre-process the data, how to clean it, which model to use for the training. And in the end, it just deploys an API endpoint that you can immediately start querying and get predictions out of it. And AutoML is still one of my most favorite approaches when it comes to validating ideas quickly or trying to see if a use case is good for AI. And this was, in my opinion, a big change in the whole landscape of tools. Now, of course, today, when you think about ChatGPT, everyone accepts that there's just an API that you can query and you can start getting predictions back. But this wasn't the case, and AutoML did a lot of changes for this and for this automation. So this was like the third wave. And when you combine the changes around the second wave and the third wave, what also happened is that the requirements for training data decreased. So I was able to train models significantly faster and with less training data than it was in the past. And this, of course, is amazing for businesses because it reduces your cost of deploying AI in your business. And the last way, of course, generative AI, where you can actually start without any training data. And this is again a big conceptual change, right? Because with OpenAI, in the most trivial way, I can describe what are my outputs that I'm looking for. I can give it a few examples, and then I can ask for a prediction. And there it is. I have an API that I can immediately query. So these are these 4 waves, and right now we're in the 4th wave, and I guess there will be a 5th wave that will find smart ways to solve the issues around the so-called hallucinations in generative AI that we're about to see in the next 2 years.
So, since you've introduced that idea, what is a hallucination?
Well, it's one of the features, if you must, of generative models. So the moment that you decide when to pick the next word, I said that there is a little bit of randomness. And what this randomness means is that the model can just generate data and make statements that sound perfectly sane and perfectly logical, but in the end, they are completely wrong. And that's one of the biggest problems of this technology, because it requires a different way of thinking compared to the traditional predictive AI, where you have a model, it gives you a prediction, it gives you a probability, and you can decide based on this probability how to handle this case. With generative AI, you don't have this. So you need to think about building either ways to ground the model so that it doesn't give you false predictions, or you need to have processes that help you de-escalate situations where you have a prediction that is just wrong.
Okay. All right. So that's the technology. Now let's get into the meat of your book. You talk about ChatGPT's transformation of recruiting. And one of the topics you raise is fake jobs and fake applications. Now, obviously, fake anything is potentially problematic, but how do those two fakes, how in your view, do those two fakes affect talent acquisition?
Yeah, let's start with fake jobs. This is something that gets very little publicity because up until now, it wasn't a big problem. We had fake jobs. It was fairly easy to spot them, right? Because they would use some kind of bad language. The bad actors behind them were not that savvy. They might have had some issues with translation and so on and so on. Now with ChatGPT, I can create a fake company in a couple of minutes with a website and everything. I can push jobs out. They're going to look very professional, very good job descriptions. So it will be very easy to convince people that this company and these jobs are real. And create biographies of team members that are fake. I can really make a great fake company out there and push these jobs across the whole networks that we are aware of. And right now, there are no tools or guardrails to capture anything like that. And afterwards, the way people get scammed, right? Up until now, it was very rudimentary, people doing like online translation tools and so on. You can actually build whole recruiting flows on top of ChatGPT that will make the experience feel very real, and people are just going to share their personal information. I find it very, very dangerous, and it is going to become a problem. And our industry, unfortunately, doesn't have a solution for it yet. So we have to start working on this. Then,
yeah, and OpenAI, pardon me for interrupting, but OpenAI did have a tool early on which could identify AI generated content so that people could at least become wary of content that might not be authentic. But they've withdrawn that tool, right?
yeah, that's true, because it's very easy to circumvent it. You basically just change one word, or you add 2 spaces. There were very simple hacks to circumvent it, and most people will not be able to verify if an output is AI generated or not. So that's not going to help, except for like really, really bad cases,
Okay, so that's fake jobs. How about fake applications?
Well, that's a hard part. So of course there will be fake applications, to try to create traffic to jobs and get paid for it. I guess this one will be probably be able to capture fairly easy and quickly because there is a business interest behind, so the motivation is significantly different than capturing fake jobs. Then there is the issue of qualitative applications, right? Because a fake application doesn't necessarily have to be fake in the sense of I'm creating here a resume that doesn't correspond to a real person to generate an apply event and get paid for it. But creating a resume for someone who uses an AI-powered technology to apply to hundreds of jobs is something that would fall into the category of fake applications, although it's not really a fake application, but it's low quality application that you don't want to have, right? Because it's just going to pile a lot more volume on your recruiters that they have to go through. So that's an issue. And again, it's really hard to detect these. What I could think of is, and it's becoming very important, is tools around validating your personality, right? We did not have this in recruiting up until now. This is one of the cool use cases for blockchain. I get asked a lot, what is like a real use case for blockchain? Because I'm in this industry for so long. And this is a real use case, someone where you can validate your identity and you can connect this to an application.
Indeed. And we know of at least one company that's working on that technology right now.
Yeah.
So that's great. So on the positive side, one of the things that you emphasize in your book is something called an AI-aware recruitment strategy. What is that, and why do you think it's important?
Well, you have to think about the vendors on the left and the employers on the right. So if you are a vendor and if some way you're delivering applications to an employer, I would expect that in the next couple of months, you'll get asked questions, right? So can you track if an application was created with AI? Can you tell if a candidate used AI to augment an application? Can you exclude this channel where we think that we got a lot of like AI augmented applications because we don't want to have them? So are you as a vendor able to answer these questions? This has to be part of your AI aware recruitment strategy, and you have to be able to answer these questions very quickly because employers are going to start asking you this. And then if you're an employer, there are basically two options, right? So your company can embrace innovation and can say, okay, we love it that people use AI tools to craft their resumes and write application letters. And we think that it's great that they use technology as an enabler to apply to multiple jobs. So we don't have a problem with this. We like these candidates and we're going to prioritize them, right? So that's one way to go. The other way is to prioritize authenticity, right? So certain industries will say, we don't want to have any AI augmented resumes or application letters or documents for that matters. And we don't want such applicants, right? So if you are an employer that's going to go after this strategy, and I'm not saying if this is a good idea or a bad one, then you need to be able to think already how you're going to detect these, right? Which means that probably you need some flows that try to validate the personality of people, for example. Or maybe you have some additional steps that try to validate early on if certain skills mentioned in the resume are there. Because if you're thinking about tools that help you detect AI text, it's just going to work for like very, very basic stuff. It's not going to work for any of the market tools that I see that candidate uses. And then, of course, the last option is that kind of balancing AI and human input. So you don't have a problem with AI assisted applications. You understand that this is part of your recruitment process. There's no way around them. So you just embrace it and you're just adjusting your processes to this. Yes, most companies are going to fall into this category. And depending on how you answer this question, you have to form your AI-aware recruitment strategy.
What kind of skills? We're here at TAtech. One of the things that we try to help employers think about is the changing skill set that recruiters are going to need as this technology comes into the recruiting team. What kind of skills would recruiters or individuals on the recruiting team have to have in order to perform that function?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I guess that's something that we will see as the future unveils, because I'm making some assumptions. So I'm not, of course, sure if any of these are going to happen. But if candidates can use AI, so can you. You can use some of the tools out there. You can use the existing AI testing tools to quickly check if a certain resume is written with AI or not. So you can learn how to use these tools too. I would say there's a lot of information on Twitter, surprisingly. So if you're able to filter out new use cases that people share on social media, that's also going to be an important skill. But most importantly, my assumption is that we're going to have a lot more tools in the value chain, the complete hiring value chain that you think about. And you have to be able to piece these tools together and get data from A to B and then again from B to A. And this is going to be part of your job because you're going to be using different services. Our industry is distributed. That's not going to change. There will be even more tools that are going to come into the future. So you need to have this basic understanding of how to move data around technology. That's kind of my bet.
Okay. Now, your book is primarily designed for employers and solution providers, but you do have a section on how ChatGPT is going to affect job search and job seekers. So, in our final couple of minutes, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I have a fairly strong position on that. In 99% of the cases where people say that they're going to use ChatGPT for job search, that's probably limited to building a plugin on top of OpenAI. And I just see it as a very simple marketing play. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's nothing exceptional out there. Whereas with ChatGPT, it's two very important use cases for job search. One, as we talked earlier, you can extract a lot of data from job descriptions in a structured form without building predictive models, without having training data, right? That's something out there. So if you think about what's important for your niche, if you're a job board, for example, what kind of data is important for job seekers when they make their decisions whether or not to apply for a job or not, you can get a lot of data now with ChatGPT fairly easy. And the second thing is that we will be able to understand natural language a lot better because this is where generative AI excels, right? You can just give it some text and it can structure it and give you a good output out of it. So I think that we're probably getting closer to a stage where people can search for jobs with a more natural language rather than just using filters. But as we have seen in the past, this is not necessarily how people want to search. So we'll have to see if this plays out the way I assume it will.
Well, people didn't want to use cell phones initially, and here we are. So I suspect that won't be an issue. But okay, we unfortunately have run out of time. It always happens. We could go on for a lot longer covering this topic and tapping into your insights. Alexander, if somebody wants to connect with you, learn more about your company, talk to you about some of your research and work, what's the best way to connect with you?
The best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I post almost every day my thoughts in a very raw format. So I write about HR tech, SEO, Google Jobs, AI, job scraping. So just find me on LinkedIn, write me a direct message if you want to discuss something or you need help with a use case. And if you want to learn more about crypto careers or Web3 jobs, just Google crypto careers, click on the first link, and you'll find the site.
Great. And of course, as I mentioned at the outset, Alexander is going to be speaking at TAtech Europe and the EMEA Job Board Forum in London on December 4 through 6, so you can meet him in person and have a conversation with him there. So to all of you joining us today, and those of you who will be watching the program later, thanks very much for watching RecAd Savvy from TAtech, the webcast that's all about all things recruitment advertising and marketing. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.